Hi, I'm Stephen Brandt with Door Training and Consulting. I'm making this video especially for the leaders within the government of Alberta because I know that you are faced with trying to create a tremendous amount of change because of our fiscal challenges, because of our economy, the oil price war now, coronavirus, all kinds of things are happening. And I know the government is working hard to create changes. Let me tell you, as an individual, as a small business owner who basically sold everything that I had to become a business person and a franchisee and to have license to do this, my livelihood currently is actually threatened more by the Alberta government's budget than it was anything else, because I was working with clients like SAIT, for example, who anticipated some difficulties in the budget, and I can work with accountability to work on a particular key result and get everybody aligned and create accountability throughout the entire chain of people to find cost savings that were anticipated they would have to deal with in the budget. Now, when the budget came down, then it affected people more than they anticipated. Things were put on hold. Spending money on doing something like this was sort of put on the back burner. Now, in the meantime, there's been new information sent out about changes to post-secondary education finance models, etc. Fundamentally, whether we're talking about post-secondary, we're talking about health, in order to change the outcomes, to change the results, to change the costs, to change the budget, to change the way we approach things, you have to change how people think and act. Our work on accountability is really all about creating, in fact, how we define a culture of accountability is a culture where people take accountability to think and act in the manner necessary to achieve those results. But here's the contrast. Is what happens when you engage other people or you come up with the ideas externally and then try and impose them. You're already seeing some pushback from post-secondary. The AHS report, I know there's already things that, for example, the nurses union is communicating to work against some of the changes and cuts and whatever else. The medical association is kind of fighting back, creating a bit of a PR battle. You've got doctors who started refuting some of the data within that report to show why certain surgeries are indeed necessary. So you've got all these people cutting up your report, and ultimately all of the people that are in the system providing healthcare, providing post-secondary, providing whatever, we're imposing change upon them, but we're not creating change in how they think and act, which is fundamentally the change that needs to be created for this to succeed. Because they're going to create friction otherwise every step of the way. So we work on accountability to do this. I recently actually was on a radio show with QR77 with Danielle Smith. We were talking about the city of Calgary had an RFP to find $75 million in savings, and they wanted to hire an army of consultants to come in and help find these savings. And my talk with her was to show, no, I have a better way to do this. Because that assumes that the people you have working for you are not smart enough to come up with those savings. And I think that that's a false assumption. That's in my case. For second part, I've also seen it when you get people rallied around a challenge and you equip and empower them to help be part of the solution, that they become ridiculously engaged, actually, and very passionate, especially if they can see your compelling case for change, which we have a very powerful case for here in Alberta, especially with our economy. So really what I wanted to do is just to say how we would come in as we would focus on culture or accountability. We work on key results. So cost savings, for example, being able to reduce a certain amount of cost from the system. How do we do that? Well, we create accountability of everybody. And I'm saying the same message to the city of Calgary, because when you bring consultants in, you're actually teaching and equipping and even moving your people to be more effective below the line. So here, and they're not going to look for any savings of their own, because they're going to now wait and see what the consultant comes up with. So any progress anybody was making can potentially stop because you've said that the consultant's suggestions are going to fuse. And then confusion, tell me what to do. People are going to be wondering, how exactly am I supposed to do this? It's not my job. That fundamentally is huge. If you have all of your employees saying, it's not my job to find savings, it's somebody else's, you've missed so much. Keep trying to, if you're trying to get Albertans to think and to move and to react in a certain way, even whether it's to vote for you or to come out to a certain, you can't have people thinking it's not my job, it's somebody else's job. They have to be part of the solution. Ignore and deny. They're going to pretend they didn't know things. They're going to finger point. They're going to lay blame. Your consultants and your leaders. And I'm watching some of the Twitter feuds that some of you are having with people, where people are going back to finger pointing to say, well, it's your fault. It's your problem. It's somebody else's problem. And maybe some of you are saying it was the prior administration's problem. The finger pointing needs to stop. To change, we need to collectively, individually and collectively, take accountability for the problem that we're in and solve it. So we come in, instead of being an army of consultants who sit down and charge you big bucks for every single head that we put on your site, we come in and equip your people, works first with your leaders, to define what it is we're trying to achieve. What are those key results, whether it's cost savings or whether it's efficiencies, whether it's speed of this or delivery of that, or quality of outcomes of the other, because every ministry will have its own different metrics, right? But we want to create this as our model of accountability, so that instead of allowing people to languish below the line where they're not being effective, where they're not being productive, where they're not contributing to solutions, to get them above the line, to see it, acknowledge the reality of the situation, and see, to own it, to really have the courage to own it, say, okay, what's my role in this? Am I contributing or am I hindering this? Am I engaged and committed enough personally? Are we committed enough to make this happen? Solve it. How do we think proactively to solve these problems, close these gaps, and then do it? How to come up with these plans to actually execute and follow through to actually deliver the improvements, the savings, the this, the that, the whatever. So we come in as a way to equip your leaders, but then also some champions to carry this work on. And then we support them from the back end. So the cost is dramatically less than bringing in a team of consultants to do this for you. This is getting your people to do it. And here's one of the benefits, because I can well imagine that the thought is that we have to make these decisions and tell people what to do because maybe the public service doesn't want to do that. Maybe that's part of your belief, that the public service is happy to just milk the system as long as we can and keep as many people employed for as long as we can, until the gravy train runs out. Well, once we have this model and we talk in this terms of language, we create a framework within which this is the accountability that is expected. This is basically the cost of entry and the cost of continuance to be an employee of the government of Alberta or AHS or whatever the case might be. So that we all are individually and collectively accountable for what it is we're trying to achieve. Again, whether it's cost savings or efficiencies or whatever the case may be. Those that don't want to get on board, those that want to stay below the line, become really obvious outliers. They'll stick out like a sore thumb. Here's where I think that's beneficial. Having worked with the government of Alberta for quite a while, you've got lots of ways for people to languish below the line and to fly below the radar and to not be seen. In fact, they'll be below the line and unaccountable in one ministry, and then they'll get a transfer to another ministry where they can continue being below the line and unaccountable until they move to another ministry. Trust me, I have seen, maybe you've experienced this too, where there's people who've managed to work at the government of Alberta for a long period of time, and their effectiveness in all these different roles maybe is questionable. Accountability creates, basically, this is the line in the sand of how we need to operate, how we need to think and act. To work here, you need to think and act like this. So we create that. And then if people are not aligned, they'll either self-select themselves out, or we create some peer pressure, to be really honest with you, that their coworkers, because if you have high performers and people who are willing to do things, the last thing they want to do is to get bogged down and hindered by people who are not with the program. So this gives a language to remediate that, to get them on board. It empowers them actually in a way to do that. And it creates opportunities for people to get on board that weren't on board. I can tell you a lot of great stories about this. Phenomenal turnarounds. And we're working with Fortune 500 orgs, some of the biggest automakers in the world, some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. In fact, I just read something yesterday that one of the companies we worked with on their culture is very integral to providing all of these coronavirus tests that are going around the world. So what I would like to do would be to open a dialogue, to have a conversation, and to talk through what some of your challenges are and how this would impact things, how to get everybody on board. Because the outcome, the end result, I think is far more desirable, to have an accountable workforce, to have an actual culture of accountability embedded into the DNA of your organization that you can then leverage and employ for all kinds of other manner of changes. Your speed to be able to change and adapt and respond to other things in future becomes just that much greater. So there's so many benefits, and this is not a sales pitch. I'm doing this because A, I really, really care. B, I'm really passionate and I'm super convinced that there is a better way. And in fact, if you listen to this thing that I did on the radio with Danielle Smith, QR77, I'll put the link down below. That really was what the conversation was about. There is a better way. We want to create internal accountability and internal resolve and internal capacity to create the necessary change, as opposed to being dependent on external. Because as long as you do that, then the consultants come in, they get blamed, they'll do PR work against it, and they're gonna slice and dice and do an autopsy on everything that the consultants come up with. And you'll be left with only little pieces that you can actually implement in some way, but your working population will fundamentally not be aligned with that. So create the alignment, create the mindset, create the culture that's going to drive that change and accelerate it. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And I would love to work with you, A, because, well, now with this corona pandemic virus and the work that I had lined up with people that put it on hold because of the government's budget, I'd really love to work with you to see, yeah, because this is a means of survival now also for me, but it's also a means of success. So I would love to have that conversation with you. My contact information will be in the invite to this email which I've sent. So thank you so much for your time. I hope we can meet in person sometime soon. Happy to do that with a small group or a large group, any group you like. Calgary or Edmonton, name the place.